Good to go? Okay, I'm going to call to order the Yamhill County Board of Commissioners formal informal session for September 8th, 2022. It is 10 o'clock in the morning. And Commissioner Starrett, would you please lead us in the flag salute?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. That brings us to our calendar session. I know we have kind of a busy week next week. Do we have anything to add to the joint calendar?
I shared something with Megan yesterday. I think that everything is on there.
I think everything else is on there.
Okay. Okay. All right, item D is public comment. This time period is reserved for public comment on any topic other than an agenda item, a quasi judicial land use matter, or a topic scheduled for a public hearing. Do we have any public comment in the audience for something that is an item that is not on the agenda, or anyone in the virtual audience? Please raise your hand. Okay, seeing none, we will move on to item E, which is department updates. We have none today. Item F, work session. We have no work sessions today. Item G is our consent agenda. Do I have a motion to approve?
So moved.
Commissioner Starrett moves approval. Is there further discussion?
No check.
All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed, same sign. Thank you. Motion passes. Item H, old business. H1 is consideration of approval in the matter of upholding the planning director's decision to approve planning docket number C-28-21, a conditional use request to operate a 9-guest room bed and breakfast facility as a home occupation. The applicant is Kellen Lancaster for 15660 Ground LLC, and this was continued from July 14th of 2022. Do I have a motion to approve?
Chair, I would move that we approve item H1.
Okay, Commissioner Kula, Vice Chair Kula moves approval. Is there further discussion?
No check.
Adopt the
Yeah.
findings. Yes. Okay.
Okay.
Okay. No further discussion. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed, same sign. Thank you. Item I, other business. Item I1 is consideration of approval of a contract employment agreement between Yamhill County and Christina Ferguson for administrative services in the amount of $74.74 per hour, not to exceed 15 hours per week, effective September 16th of 2022 through June 30th of 2023 with automatic renewal. And Commissioners, I will move approval of item I1. Is there further discussion or questions?
No
No.
chair.
Okay. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Aye. All opposed, same sign. Thank you. Motion passes. I2, consideration of approval to submit an application for the fiscal year 2022-23 Emergency Management Performance Grant, EMPG, retroactive to September 4th of 2022. Commissioners, I will move approval of item I2. Is there further discussion or questions?
No chair.
No.
Seems particularly important today.
Yes. We'll talk about that later.
Yeah.
Okay, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed, same sign. Thank you. I3, consideration of approval of a contract employment agreement between Yamhill County Sheriff's Office and Rodney S. Dunham to provide pre-employment background investigation services in the amount of $45 per hour, retroactive to August 24th of 2022 through June 30th of 2023 with automatic renewal. Do I have a motion to approve?
Chair, I move that we approve item I3.
Okay. Any further discussion?
No chair.
All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed, same sign. Thank you. Motion passes. Item I4, consideration of approval of a contract employment agreement between Yamhill County Sheriff's Office and William Mike Brown to provide pre-employment background investigation services in the amount of $45 per hour, retroactive to August 24th, 2022 through June 30th of 2023 with automatic renewal.
Chair, I'd move approve Move that we approve item I4.
Commissioner
that I
Kula
do it
moves
as well.
approval. Is there further discussion?
No, Chair.
All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 All opposed, same sign. Thank you. Motion passes. Item I5, consideration of approval of a quote and contract between Yamhill County Health and Human Services and Zoom Video Communications for telemedicine and group meetings in the amount of $168,070, effective upon approval for 3 years. Do I have a
Sure.
motion to approve?
Sure, I move approval.
Okay, Commissioner Sterrett moves approval. And obviously, this is a very important piece of our HHS department and their capabilities. No further discussion?
No, Chair.
I just
Um,
want to add that this does seem very expensive and it is an expensive contract, but it will take the place of a less reliable
Yes.
and less flexible teams. And also
Less
it's,
secure.
it's the telehealth component, which
Mhm.
is got those HIPAA requirements. So
Right.
this, it's got some sticker shock to it, but it's
Mhm.
definitely, there's going to be some cost savings on the back end.
Sure. Okay, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed, same sign. Thank you. Motion passes. Item I6, consideration of Secure Rural Schools and Community Self-Determination Act, SRS County allocation. And commissioners, I don't believe we need a vote. We just need a consensus on how we're going to divide these funds up typically, and I'll have Ken sort of break it down and. as to how we
Right.
do it.
It doesn't require a specific motion or anything, but this is something that's requested from USDA that we need to submit. And historically, the split has been 85-15, with 85 going to roads and schools and 15% going to Title II and nothing going to Title III. And I just wanted to confirm with the board if you were okay with maintaining the 85-15 split, or if you wanted to do something slightly different and have some funds going to Title III. You know, we have funds in Title III. It's really limited on what we can use it for. I don't know if there's necessarily a need to have any portion of those funds, that allocation, but also keeping in mind that there's some limitations in the documentation that I shared on how we can break this out. And I couldn't find any original documentation on how the 85-15 was determined. That was before me. So it's been a number of years. And before I fill out the form and submit, I just wanted to confirm with the board that you're okay with the 85-15, or if not, if you wanted to have a discussion, if you wanted to do something a little bit different, like a 85-13 and 2, or something along those lines, a percentage split.
Yeah, and just to clarify, so Title III they're restricted to search and rescue activity on federal land or Firewise programs.
Correct.
So I think there was concern with the ONC committee that there may not be enough projects to really fill Title III funding.
Or
Or,
Title II, or
well, for some counties, Title III, other counties, of course, it's you know, a big deal, but for
And
us, I'm not sure.
What's the concern of not filling the program?
Well, if you're, and I think we're limited, isn't it 7% and 8%? There's a restriction on how
Correct.
you can divvy it up.
Correct.
So,
Mhm.
you know, for us, are we really going to need funds for search and rescue on federal land?
Right.
Mhm.
Our sheriff hasn't really done those activities for a while.
no,
so-
and we have funds that are currently in the Title III fund within the budget
Mhm.
for what
Existing
we've
funds, yeah.
received in the past that
Yeah.
is carried forward each year. I don't have the numbers right in front of me, but we do have funds in the
Mhm.
budget. So should that come up, that we do have an eligible expense, we do have sufficient funds in the current. I don't think we're at a point that we need to contribute. I can't really think of a justification. So.
Okay.
No, I mean, the 85-15 seems reasonable to me
Yeah.
going forward. I do know, but again, there is money in the Title III that Soil Water is going to come back with a request for funding for next year's wildfire prevention workshops. So, but there's money in the budget.
And so
in
it could be,
that fund, I
my
should say.
recommendation might change on that if we
Mhm.
did start to see an
Right, a
increase
regular,
of the usage of the funds,
Mhm.
and that, you know, it may be something that if we had a more account history that could back up a recommendation to do that.
Yeah.
But I just haven't seen it. We funded one program
Mhm.
Yeah.
in the last 3 or 4 years out of that fund.
Great, thank you.
Okay, well, this is due then, I think the 19th, so we're
30th?
comfortable with 8515.
I am.
Yeah,
Okay.
I am as well.
Okay, so that's our consensus. Okay, moving on to item I7. Consideration of approval in the matter of an order vacating a portion of a public road at the request of Leah J. Gillette and Albin H. Okay, you're gonna have to help me on the last name.
Debaloo?
Debaloo,
I don't know. That's a guess.
There are possible ways of saying that, many possible ways.
Debalu. We apologize if
The
you're
people who
watching.
are in the record.
Without a public hearing, Public Works docket number RV-2-2022. And I believe this was Forest Drive and the right of way goes through their front or backyard. So
Yeah.
it makes sense to vacate it. Commissioners, I will move approval of item I7. Is there further discussion?
My only comment is that I appreciate seeing these come forward. It
Yeah.
feels like both Public Works, County Council, and the Planning Department are doing a lot of work to clean
They are.
up a lot of our maps and who owns what. So
Yeah.
They've
Thanks
been
to
busy.
Colton,
Yeah,
too,
the
for his work.
surveyor's been involved in this
Yeah.
project as well. So yeah, it's really that. It's to clean up some of these roads that were platted at some point in the past, but they're not currently being used as a public road and there's no
Mhm.
plan to do that. So it's just clearing up some of these items that have been lingering on the
Okay.
maps for a long time.
I think I moved approval.
Mhm.
you did.
You-
That was just my further discussion.
Okay, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed, same sign. Thank you. Motion passes. Item I8, consideration of approval in the matter of an order vacating a portion of a public road at the request of Stephen A. Walker and Mary L. Walker without a public hearing, Public Works docket number RV-4-2022. And this is the undeveloped right-of-way off of Doobie Valley Road, or yes, off of Doobie Valley Road, I believe.
And Chair, I would move that we approve item I8.
Okay, Commissioner Kula moves approval. Is there further discussion?
That's right.
Okay, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed, same sign. Thank you. Motion passes. And just another thanks to Colton for putting these together
Yes.
and Mark Lago for his work in signing off on them.
Mhm.
Item I9 is consideration of approval to submit a grant application for the Criminal Justice Commission Justice Reinvestment JRA Capacity Building Grant. And it looks like we have Jessica in the audience if we have any questions, commissioners. But this is basically the DEI, or the Diversity, Equity, Inclusion portion or component of the grant. And these funds will be spent on basically a consultant to figure out how we can best implement those priorities.
I have a question, Jessica,
Sure.
if I may. I know this is this is grant funding, but it's ultimately taxpayer money. And I always like to look at these. We get a lot of these coming across, getting information, whether it's from OHA, from various governmental organizations regarding DEI training and contracts. And I know that they are oftentimes a component of, in other words, being able to be compliant for additional grant funding. But I sort of see this DEI training as a cottage industry now, where we're seeing a lot of people who are consultants, DEI training consultants. And I'm wondering if this moves the needle. Does this do anything? I see all this money, and I know this is not you. This is, a component of House Bill 3194. Money that would be better spent on local mentorship programs, or something where you could actually take an at-risk kid or an at-risk community member and say, I've got somebody to work with you, not wait till you're, So when you talk about the gap analysis, would that be something that would be identified through this? And again, the components of the DEI training, we see a lot of elements of some of these trainings, which frankly are disturbing because they pit one group against another. And I just want to make sure that we're not in any way complicit in that. And I was wondering what your input was.
Absolutely. Thank you for the question, Commissioner. I will just start by beginning to mention that this was $600,000 that was set aside for the 2021-23 biennium by the Criminal Justice Commission per the request of the Grant Review Committee, who reviews all the formula and supplemental grants each biennium. And the intent was to assist with local jurisdictions in whatever way they determine. So there's a great deal of flexibility with regard to what we choose to do with these funds. When our criminal justice team got together, just some of the main brainstorming that we had was hiring a consultant that could assist with data analysis, for instance, determining what our demographics are, looking at our systems overall. Do we have any gaps in services that we could improve upon? And then ultimately, the intent of this grant is to develop what they're referring to as a action equity plan, which again has a great deal of flexibility, but the idea is to develop a guide for next steps on improving system, providing systems to our underserved populations. So there's a great deal of flexibility. I will also mention in 2019, there was a House Bill 3064 that passed that added the diversity, equity, and inclusion component to justice reinvestment. So in the 21-23 biennium, that was the first time we actually saw that component of the application. And although we did a great job with putting something together, because there have been efforts, I think one of the barriers that we experienced was lack of funding to support the continued efforts of that work. And I think the Criminal Justice Commission recognized that. And so my impression is the intent of this is not only to assist counties in supporting those efforts, but also to provide a way of improving upon that component of the application for the 2003-25 application, formula and supplemental. And just as a reminder to the commissioners, we are very fortunate in Yamhill County that we have applied since 2013 and been granted these funds. Both the formula grant, which supports our pretrial justice and smart sentencing prison diversion program, which supports 4 FTE. And then the district attorney's office also receives supplemental funding, and he supports 1 full-time FTE. I should also mention 10% of these funds go to Juliet's House, our non-for-profit victim services. So did that help answer your question? In that, again, there's a great deal of flexibility. I also had a meeting with the Criminal Justice Commission to better understand what the intent of these funds were. I was told that there's a great deal of flexibility, especially with the budget portion. The narrative, as you probably saw, was very simple. And as I understand it, just submitting the application, each jurisdiction that does so receives the funding automatically, which is wonderful. It's meaning it's non-competitive. So we are excited with the opportunity, if approved by the board, to submit this application, and if awarded by the Criminal Justice Commission. And as we get into the work, I think at that point we can decide exactly how we're going to use the funds. This was really our best guess. There was also a very short timeline. I want to say maybe it was a 6-week period of time between release of the grant requirements and the due date, which happens to be tomorrow. So I'm glad that we were ever able to pull it together during the summer months with vacations between all stakeholders and such. So did that help answer your question, Commissioner?
We work best under pressure.
I was going to say, I seem to do the same, especially working in the correction system.
No, thank you. And thank you for being here today to answer that question. I appreciate it and what you and your team do. So thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you. Any other question, commissioners?
No, I think, I understand the concern for sure. I think that this appears to be more focused on data, acquiring data, which data is obviously a foundation for anything we do. So that's a positive. But I wonder, in terms of gathering this data, there's other, as you know very well, there's other risk factors for the folks who enter into our services, whether it be, history of family domestic violence or their socioeconomic status or their lack of education, whatever it might be. So is that kind of part of what you're looking for to see how we can match our services to that? That's how we define inequity versus maybe, my version of inequity is different from Commissioner Sterrett's or Commissioner Kula's. So when we're developing a program, it might look very different. So is it more about, is it more focused on the data part of it, at least at this point?
So thank you, Chair. So as I mentioned, there's a great deal of flexibility, but I believe that our local stakeholder group, and I'm basing this on our previous experience with our National Institute of Corrections Evidence-Based Decision-Making Network. I think part of our issue is we're feeling that we need to look at our local data first, look at all our local demographics to understand where there might be barriers like you indicated, and then trying to address those barriers, or in the criminal justice world, we call them responsivity issues. If there's a communication issue, if there's schedule issues, cultural issues, learning how to better address those so that our service delivery improves their ability to success in our system.
Right. And then thus,
Great.
when you apply for the competitive grants, you actually can explain that this is how you're going to do it too,
And that's the hope
Yeah.
as well.
in a very specific way.
It'll be
I admired your attempts to answer in the past, and I'm glad that you're going to get specifics.
I am too. I'm delighted because that certainly was an experience for our local team moving forward with the 2001-23 application. We did the best that we could, but you know, it probably could have been stronger if we had the capability and the funding and support to do what this grant will allow us if awarded.
Thank you. Great. Thank you, Jessica. Okay, so commissioners, I will move, unless there was a motion. I don't think there was a motion.
I don't think
I'll
there
move
was.
it.
Yeah.
I will move approval of item I9. Is there further discussion?
No, Chair.
Okay, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed, same sign. Thank you. Motion passes. Okay, item I10 is discussion regarding the ballot measure, or a ballot measure, to create a new fire district combining the current city of McMinnville and McMinnville rural service areas. And this is something, commissioners, that I added to the agenda because I believe that we've all perhaps individually met with members of the city of McMinnville's team on this.
I have.
Guilty. Okay. So I just wanted to kind of get a consensus on, you know, I don't think it requires a motion, but get a consensus on how we're going to move forward. There was some ambiguity around our role in
Mhm.
facilitating perhaps a faster process for this. But I think that Truman Stone, the attorney for the city, cleared that up a bit, that there is
Yep.
actually a role that we can play.
Yes, there is a specific process under ORS Chapter 198. And what the city has asked us to do is to move forward with the district formation process under that provision, which would initially require an action by the Board of Commissioners to formally initiate the formation process. And because the new district would incorporate a city, we'll also need a resolution from the city, which Truman tells me the city is going to be taking action on later this month. So once we have that, if the board's willing to continue to move forward and assist them in this formation process in this way,
Mhm.
it would likely come back to the board sometime in October or November for the board to then take action to initiate the process. And then there would be a need to schedule at least one or maybe more public hearings. And the need for action in October or November is to ensure that the steps that are required can be completed so that this could be hopefully placed on the ballot at the city's request at the election in May of 23. And Truman and I have also been discussing there could be some costs associated with a proceeding this way, but he's indicated to me that the city, and presumably I guess it would involve some of the folks who are currently in the rural district.
Right.
Because as I understand it, it would essentially be a consolidation of the rural district
Mhm.
with the city.
Mhm.
And then one of the other questions would also be on the ballot would be the dissolution of the existing rural district. But that the city would be willing to enter into an IGA to make sure that the county would be reimbursed for any of the costs associated with assisting them through this formation process. So more information to come as we move forward. But as you indicated, Chair, I think the reason for this conversation was just to make sure that there was agreement among the board to continue to move forward. And I'll come back with more information as I continue to work with Truman. The other thing he did say is that if there would be interest from the board, the chiefs would be happy to come and provide additional information as we get closer to a decision date.
Right. And the component about sharing costs or perhaps
Yeah.
front loading costs. That's a concern of mine. Typically, I don't support things that sort of fast track ballot measures. I feel like if if you believe in something, you're going to put the time in to go get signatures and do the work. And so if we do approve sort of fast tracking, if you will, this measure, there's value there, right? It's your time, your money, your effort. And so I would have an expectation that the county taxpayers aren't footing any part of the bill to put this on the ballot, that the city is actually doing that. So I just want to make that.
And we hadn't talked about
Clear.
sort of front loading, if the idea would be for the city to provide some funds to the county to then use to pay for these before we've actually made the expenditure. I can have that conversation with Truman. What we talked about so far was, to the extent there were costs, once we knew what those were and once the county had made those expenditures, then we would go back to the city for reimbursement. But if there's a preference to structure it differently, we can certainly have that conversation.
Mhm.
If it's possible. I see Ken with an odd
Front loading
expression.
or
So
reimbursing?
maybe receiving funds and then spending them would have a budgetary impact that we also need to discuss. So
I'd be curious to hear your thoughts on that.
Well, I wasn't ready to go, just kind of thinking about, I mean,
Neither was
they're budgetarily, because typically just working around with appropriations and things like that, not to say that the board couldn't take an administrative action, an amendment to the budget if we did receive, I don't know what the dollar amount would be and what that would look like, but if we had the funds, or, I'd probably recommend that if the city already has the expenditure appropriated and have the funds, that we would work on some type of a reimbursement that would reimburse county funds would probably be the easiest way to go.
Yeah.
And then I'm assuming that we'd probably have an IGA that would spell out those conditions that would lock that in, that would be an agreement between the city.
And that's what we had
county.
talked about. And we don't yet know exactly, for example, what the costs of the May election would be, because we're not sure what else is going to be on the ballot.
Right.
And as we know, those costs are distributed among all of the items that appear on that particular ballot. So
Okay.
The other thing is pass or fail, that
Either way.
IGA would include the
Mhm.
specifics of the county being reimbursed, that
Correct.
there's no cost to the county, including staff time.
yeah, we can talk about how much of that we want to try and estimate and include, but we certainly could, if that's the decision, if the board would like us to try and estimate that and include some of those. I'll look at the statute and make sure that there isn't a limitation on the kinds of expenses that we might be able to be reimbursed for. But if that's available and if that's the interest of the board, we can certainly include those elements in the IGA.
Great, thank you.
Yeah.
Whether it's reimbursement or front loading it, it doesn't matter. I
Yeah.
want to make sure that county taxpayers aren't
Absolutely. Right.
paying for a portion.
Paying for it. And
Yeah.
then,
With that said, though, about, sort of fast tracking, I do think, we've been having this conversation for years. You guys have been involved in this conversation for years. And I think that the reality on the ground is getting to the point where we need to have this discussion. The public needs to hear what the plan is. And so I am in favor of helping get this done and on the May ballot, so that discussion can take place, and you can spend your time out in the community talking about the reality and why this would be needed. So,
especially in concrete terms, I know that, y'all have been, I direct myself in this direction because there's a team from the city here, but y'all have been working on it and talking about it, but you didn't yet have concrete terms. And I'm excited about being able to like really engage with the residents in the two districts, or the district in the city. So.
And I would agree, having had a chance to sit down and have some discussions about how this would go, and then also having sort of the past being prologue here regarding TBFNR and a little bit of that informing what we're doing, because we did go through that. So I do agree that the time spent knocking on doors, trying to get signatures, would be better spent in educating folks as to what the reality is of your needs right now. And there's some urgency here. So I would go along with that.
yep. If there's anything we learned during TBFNR,
It's very
that,
handy having experience with this.
number one, this is a lengthy process. Number two, people expect good fire service. That's an expectation. So,
And it's likely folks will have questions because I can't recall how many public meetings we had, but there
Yeah.
was a lot. And I know that
Yep.
there's been a lot already, but
Mhm.
that'll certainly be something that will likely continue going forward. So.
Okay, so if there's consensus, we will continue to move forward and work with Truman.
Yeah, and look forward to
To-
a resolution,
Sounds good.
Yes.
a resolution from the city that then we can
Yes.
move on.
Right.
Okay,
Thank you. Thank you.
pretty painless.
That wasn't too bad.
We just had a meeting with the partner, our chief library from the fire department.
Hi, chief.
We had a resolution.
Our county administrator is probably going to want you to come up. Sorry.
Just to update the commission, we had a meeting with Walt Gallo, who is the interim city attorney, along with Truman yesterday, and we'll be bringing the resolution. We are waiting this meeting today. Will be on the city's agenda for the 27th of September, with the
Okay.
resolution and okay, attorney terms. I'm a fire guy, so forgive me, but the request to the commission for placing it on the ballot will be on the city council agenda on the 27th.
Okay,
Great.
sounds great.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Thank you.
Chief.
Thank you for coming.
Thank you, Counselor Todd. Thank you for coming. Okay, so. September. Okay, so item 11 is discussion of, is that item 11? Yes. Discussion of a commercial property assessed clean energy or CPACE program. And we've sort of touched on this a little bit in past meetings. However, just to sort of recap, we have this CPACE program that we've been approached about in terms of implementing it here in the county. It was approved by the state, and then local jurisdictions have to adopt an official program to allow for it to happen in their county. My discussions, at least so far, have been around having staff look into and check with other counties, Multnomah County and Deschutes County specifically, because I believe they're the only two that have them.
As far as I know.
In terms of, staff time, the reality around what this is going to require for us, any sort of programs or administrative, burdens that we might take on with this program. And there's been a little bit of feedback Multnomah County had where they were kind of the pass-through for this, which was a problem. So then just Deschutes County revamped how they were doing that. So I think I'm just looking for a little bit more clarity. But I think, in terms of having staff put in some time into doing that, we need to have a direction or a consensus that we actually want to consider the program before we invest all that time.
The one thing, again, my concern and my discussions with staff have been over the capacity to take on another project, and to what degree will our administrative staff and county counsel's office have to take this on, because I'm just looking at, once again, there are lots of things that we might want to get involved in, but I don't feel like we have enough information and to hand this off to them without really knowing whether or not, I don't think, I'm not saying there's no value in it, but when we talk about a public or a third party administrator, is this something that we have the ability to do in-house? And the other question I had was what the eligible building improvements would be. So I think I need more information, but I don't want to sort of dump it on staff and say, okay, you guys have to come up with all of this substantiating information. So I just want to be really cautious of what we're asking staff to do.
And Chair, I think that Abisha Stone from SEDCOR and I were in some initial meetings, and my understanding at least is that Abisha has pulled together more information. She is here if you'd like to have some of the questions answered, because while we haven't directed her and staff to do this, I think that you've taken it on as part of your contractual obligations with the county. If we think that Abisha may have answers, would you entertain asking her?
Chair, I'm going to leave that up to you in terms of today, what your thoughts are about having that discussion today.
Yeah, I wasn't really prepared to have the discussion about the program itself, but
Okay.
if there's questions around, have some of these jurisdictions been contacted, and you're prepared to answer, then welcome.
Yeah, that'd be great.
And so I think some of the questions that I heard were how much staff time
Yeah.
from the jurisdiction is it literally just a pass through? Is it taking the time of the county?
Yeah, fair enough. Thank you for inviting me up. I was glad to be able to attend today. So the CPACE program has been considered for a couple of projects that are in the county going on right now. And it does include all types of different projects that might be able to benefit from access to this private funding, because that's what it is. It's a private funding mechanism. The reason why the county has to adopt an ordinance to allow for it is that there is a process by the assessor's office, right, by which they put a lien on the property. And that's because this type of financing gets amortized, 20 to 30 years. So it's a lengthy amortization. It allows for the investor to stack their financial deck so they can access more of the value of their property while they're trying to make these investments. So that is the action, is this initial ordinance development, and then the lien placement process. There is a process by which you can have a public administrator of this program. So they're actually taxing every year what the cost of that, they're actually acting as kind of an intermediary, moving the money back and forth between the lien holder and the lender. I would not recommend that approach to the program. We have seen, and that's the one I think that you, Chair, were referring to, where, and it may have been Washington County. I think it's Washington, Deschutes, and Multnomah. And Multnomah being the newest one, having learned from some of these other programs, said, we don't really want to do that. That's too much work. It kind of puts us in a position of having more exposure. We want to have a private administrator. So you can adopt a program where you identify that private administrator. In our region, it could look like the Council of Governments potentially. It could be a private party. We have spoken to several of these private parties that act as third-party administrators. And then the only action of the county that would be ongoing is placing these liens. The types of projects that folks are looking at for use of these funds, we have quite a few hotels, multifamily housing, affordable housing, anybody that essentially is looking for the type of project that the funding could be used for. And those types of projects are things like EV charging, solar and wind energy, boilers, chillers, furnaces, HVAC upgrades and controls, seismic retrofits, energy storage, combined heat and power, water conservation, and building envelopes. So those are some of the types of programs that are approved in Oregon to access this type of funding. So when we think about a multi-unit affordable housing project, right, that maybe wants to put a solar array on the top of the building so that they have a more sustainable cost model into the future, this sort of, again, private lending program would allow them to access that value of their property to get that loan so that they can invest in that project so that they have a more sustainable sort of future, right, outlook. So those are the general, that's the general information. I've been working on getting more informed about this program, right? Talking to our colleagues in these other counties who have adopted these programs. Patty Herzog from MEDP has also she came to Oregon from Nevada. They've been utilizing this program for quite some time. So she was a little bit more versed on it and has been helping me to become more educated about the program. We are happy to collectively bring forward to the board information regarding this program and a recommendation for a program to consider that would not have the county being that intermediary, right? Just the action of filing the lien. And so in that way, kind of maybe taking some of the burden off of county staff in doing that work, but certainly at the pleasure of the board. So in any way that we can support you in learning a little bit more about this program or identifying an opportunity to approach a program, we are happy to do that. We see a lot of projects in the region that could really benefit from this access to private funding.
Thank you. So a couple of things. So for the assessor, it's not just the lien, they have to do an assessment first. So they have to go out and do an appraisal and all that first.
Right.
And then the process of the lien. So there is a bit of staff requirement and time.
Chair, don't they already have to do that? Sorry, with a new project. Forgive me, I think I'm somewhat ignorant.
For
of
the
this.
lien,
No, don't you, when you build a new project or you do a new investment in a property, you need to have the tax
sure,
assessor
I'm just
comes
saying
out.
there's staff interaction.
Okay.
And requirements of staff in terms of the lien. Now,
Okay,
Derek, I asked Derek about it. He said not really a huge time commitment in terms of the lien. So there's that.
sorry. I interrupted you.
And then the other side is really more of the liability side, a potential liability for the county, because there's a reason why lenders only lend up to 80% of a value or whatever, right? There's a risk in lending 100% of the value. So I'm just wondering maybe if, and this is why we're having the discussion, but if county council could ferret out some of that, is there risk for the county? Is there no risk? I don't know. Because we're essentially green lighting and allowing,
Yeah, what we've
full
looked at so
borrowing
far, I
capacity.
don't believe there is any additional risk. I do still have a question, and Derek and I discussed this a little bit as well, what the sort of priority is in the liens. If this is something like a local improvement district type lien, or exactly how this lien would apply in priority, if and when there was a default and a need to foreclose.
right?
But I don't know that that really speaks to or suggests any additional liability on
Yeah.
the part of
Chair,
the
if I-
county, but that would be something that we would obviously spend some more time looking into, and that was a question I was going to possibly ask Abishal
Okay.
as well, so thanks for
Okay.
raising it. But yeah, if you've got more info, that'd be great.
it's my understanding that it does operate very similar to a local improvement district. In the case of a default, the two lenders, right? So the primary lender, obviously you have that primary, and then this would be a secondary lender, would then handle that loan very much like a foreclosure, right? So it defaults back to the burden of those lenders. And also it's my understanding that there is potential to capture an administrative fee for the processing portion of the work that's done by the assessor
That's all right.
and the administrator, the person that also administrates
Mhm.
it. So
Chair, I have a question. If the typical commercial loan is a duration of 7 to 10 years, so we're looking at a big difference in terms of the extension of what this would be. Adding that into the discussion, again, going back to liability, I mean, normally if you've got to pay something back to a commercial lender in under 10 years, and now you've got a 20 to 30-year window. I'm just wondering about that piece and how does that pencil out?
well, it's very much like an 80-20 loan, right? So you've got that 80% loan with your primary lender, and maybe that has a 7-year duration. This then becomes that, 15, 20% loan that has a 20 to 30-year duration. And so, I mean, it's all private funding, right? There's no sort of public engagement other than the process of filing the lien. So this is a private loan that is handled between the lender and the borrower. And so it's just one of them has a shorter duration, another one has a longer duration.
So if there was a default, it wouldn't necessarily involve the assessor in foreclosing that CPACE lien. That would be, again, handled by the private lenders the way they would handle their loans today.
That is my understanding. That's how it's been explained to us by our colleagues in these other counties that have been implementing these programs.
And so then if there are one or two lenders involved, the likelihood of the county ever needing to get involved for a property tax lien foreclosure is even less likely, because that almost never happens when you have lenders involved, because the lenders are noticed in the event that folks aren't paying their property taxes. So the property taxes get paid right away, and then the lenders will pursue their own foreclosure process if necessary. So I don't think there's any added time or risk, at least from that perspective, to the assessor's office adding this additional value to the tax roll, to the statement.
So I'm not a lender or well versed in lending, but dumb question. So is the role of the county then to allow an initial lien without default? Is that what we're doing?
I'm still not clear on exactly how that works, but
Okay.
it's it's, my understanding is that the added value of the property through these improvements is assessed by the assessor. And then if the property is worth $500,000 today, and after the improvement, it's worth $700,000, then their valuation is changed to reflect that. And so their taxes would reflect that. And I don't know how it would appear on the statement. Derek and I were talking about that too. Would it appear as a separate line?
Right.
I don't really know.
Mhm.
Those are some of the more detailed questions that we hadn't completely answered yet.
Mhm.
I don't know if that helps
Okay.
answer your question or not.
I don't know.
I
I didn't,
think he gave you a different answer.
Maybe I did.
Answer to a different question than maybe the
I
one you
did.
asked,
Yeah,
but
sorry about that.
well,
Ken has
I
it. Oh.
guess my question in general is why do you need the county, right? If you're
I've-
gonna be a
I've wondered
private
that
lender
too.
and you want to
How-
loan
right.
the rest of the
Right. And
20%,
maybe
why do you need the
Avishon
county?
knows why it's structured this way as opposed to different, because it sounds like your primary lender would still have first priority,
Yep.
and then the CPACE lender would be in second position.
Mhm.
So it doesn't
Yeah.
appear to give them an advantage in that sort of traditional lending priority. So I'm not sure either. And that was again another question that we still hadn't.
and
gotten an
perhaps
answer
it's
to.
that by state law,
Yeah.
you can't lend
Yeah.
on these improvements, right? And so they had to authorize it by state law.
And I think that
value.
county council has, made some good points, right? In what you were saying, that there's this process of assessing the property so that you identify that future value so that a lender can lend against that value. And why it has to be by ordinance through the county or a jurisdiction, I don't really know, to be honest with you. And maybe it's just because you're utilizing staff time to do that work and then to place that lien.
Right.
I don't know the answers to that, but
As
we could
opposed to
try
just
to,
authorizing it by statute, right?
yeah,
Yeah.
and certainly we could try to understand that.
Can you?
Yeah, I didn't realize that this might be an improvement that you couldn't get lending for. If that's true, then that might make sense that that the legislature would set this process up. Why it was set up to involve the county in this way, I'm not sure
Mhm.
either.
So what do you mean by you can't get lending for? So like solar panels?
Well, so and it is in the text. Feel like I should. I don't have my CPACE
have it.
materials in front of you,
I
but
have it. Do you want it?
essentially you can't. And Abhishek
need
talked
that?
about this. You can't
Do you need that?
lend on the and Commissioner Starrett also mentioned this. You can't lend on the total value. Like a lender won't.
It won't lend up
like,
to 100%.
Won't lend up to 100%.
Right.
And so it's the statute authorized counties to consider allowing lenders to lend to businesses up to the total value based upon these improvements. So essentially there's the authorizing statute and then our ordinance authorizing it says that as a policy, we want businesses to, or developments, so it doesn't have to be a business, I realize that. The developers in our jurisdiction, when they are improving the value by increasing the energy efficiency of their improvements, that we want them to get that full value when they lend. I think that's like.
Yeah.
There's
Right.
pieces
Like
of
big
that, sure.
picture of
Yeah,
it, right?
yeah,
But
pieces
that
of that.
goes back to my original comment, which is there's a reason why lenders only lend up to 85% of a value. There's risk, there's huge risk in lending up to 100%. So are we then endorsing risky lending practices? Or, in my opinion, if you're going to take the risk, then there has to be some type of back end to that. And it feels like the county's the back end. I'm just not sure what the back end means. What are we assuming in terms of that risk?
I don't think the county itself is assuming that risk.
Mhm.
It could be that by setting this structure up, it allows for this additional type of funding for these types of projects to be repaid over a longer period of time,
Mhm.
Right.
making it easier for borrowers to consider taking on that additional debt
Yeah.
for these particular improvements.
Yeah,
It could be riskier, but I think the risk is probably borne by the borrower and the bank.
it is. And like you said, it's amortized over a longer period of time. And I
Yeah.
think one of the motives behind creating this statute was finding ways to create opportunities for folks that are developing new properties or redeveloping properties or need to invest in seismic upgrades. We think about downtown Portland, there was an assessment done, and within like, a 12 block rate, or no, it was more than a 12 block radius, but within, kind of the city center of downtown Portland, there was 1,200 buildings that were in need of seismic upgrade. But you think about, a masonry building that needs to get seismic upgrades, the cost that's associated with doing that sort of thing. So when, as a state, we have intentions to encourage people to be more energy efficient and water efficient and to identify ways to use less energy in general, right? Or to create EV charging stations or those sorts of things. And we want to encourage folks to have the ability to do that. But there's certainly a high cost associated with doing that, creating a program that allows them to borrow up to a higher level of the total value of that property, and then create a type of a loan that can be amortized over 20 to 30 years versus the traditional sort of commercial 7 to 10 year program, gives them an opportunity to approach the value of that property, pay it back over a longer period of time, which is less out of pocket per month, right? So in terms of cash flow and funds that they can use for the development, they have more access to that. But they're also encouraged to invest in these sort of long-term impact sort of projects. So it's kind of bigger than just the getting access to more money. It's the for what means. What are you trying to achieve? And I think that was the goal of these states that adopted these programs. I mean, looking at Nevada, Arizona, California, Oregon, Washington, saying, how do we encourage folks to invest in energy efficiency, water efficiency, conservation, things like that. So there's a bigger picture attached to this.
And
Sorry, go ahead.
And if I can, I've been waiting for a break here. So
I've stopped looking towards you.
because again, I think what, from my perspective, what we're kind of looking for direction here, because we're talking a lot about different elements in the risk and the program. And I know it's really difficult to kind of give some direction, but right now, we've got a presentation, we've got some requests that the county consider implementing this type of program. And keeping in mind of the current workload or a lot of things are already on county council's desk and my desk, and trying to determine, I think right now we're seeing if there's interest from the board that you want us to proceed and of looking into this program and getting more detail about some of that risk. It's the chicken or the egg kind of thing that we don't necessarily want to dive into this and prepare a program and bring it forward, and it's not something that the board's interested in entertaining. So trying to find that balance between the two. And I think there's a lot of great questions around this program. In fact, some of the challenges that I have is I don't have a lot of information. I just haven't had time to really even look at this program with other priorities that we're currently working on. And if there is an interest from the board that we explore this in more detail, I think that's the direction we're looking for today, before we dive in and start preparing things, and just kind of wanted to gauge, where the board might be if you really want to consider this and want us to do a deeper dive. Because I mean, this is a newer program for the state of Oregon. There's not a lot of like we said, now, Washington County, that's new to me. I didn't know that, so we have 3 other counties that have done this here fairly recent. So there's not a lot of, there's just a few other counties that we can go and look and see how they set that up and provide some more details and information and do a deeper dive based on a lot of the questions that were brought up today. If there's interest in us proceeding with this. And I think that's the direction we're looking for today.
And to the extent it helps make your decision about whether or not you're interested in moving forward, I was pulling up the Deschutes County website that's dedicated to this, and it talks about some of the different benefits that they believe the program provides. And one of them is the up to 100% long-term financing. This is something that's transferable on sale. It could have cash flow benefits because of the longer term, low interest financing. And these costs can be passed through to tenants. So that's another way to, and these energy efficient improvements are often attractive in entering into new agreements with tenants, right? If you've made these improvements, you can maybe attract tenants that you might not otherwise have been able to attract, who are particularly interested in these energy efficient improvements. So those are some of the benefits that at least Deschutes County has chosen to highlight on its website.
And I believe Marion County is considering this. Is that correct?
Yeah, Marion
Okay.
County looked at this
I didn't follow
program.
up with you.
Right. And it was based at the time on a project that had come before them that was interested in utilizing the program. And then that was right around the time that the pandemic hit and everybody kind of focused their direction elsewhere. And so this is a program that they have considered. I'm sure that they will be looking at it again very soon. They did not adopt an ordinance, but really that was just out of, kind of a specific project driving it, and then the pandemic really taking people's attention elsewhere.
Yeah.
Cheryl,
Okay.
I have a suggestion at this point. I think we have a lot of questions and there appear to be a lot of benefits to this program. And that's not what we're discussing today. I think what we really need to discuss is whether we want to ask staff to commit time to it. I think in the hierarchy of priorities, we're subject to the tyranny of the urgent, and we seem to have more and more of that. And I think at some point we're going to have to say, okay, this might be something we want to look at, but are we going to ask staff to get involved at this point? What I would suggest is that we get more information through COG, through SEDCOR, through chats with other counties. But I don't see this as something that I would say, okay, here you go, staff, another thing for your list, when they can't even get to what they have on their list. I am interested in this, and there seems like there's a lot of value to it. But I think we should get more information before we get staff involved.
So, Chair, if I, to clarify then, are you saying, hey, Abisha, double thumbs up into your colleagues, but nobody else involved, or like, I'm a little bit confused. That's all.
Well, just that if we, at this point, there's consensus to say to staff, yeah, we want more information about this, then at that juncture, staff now is tasked with doing the due diligence on this information for the board. But if we have SEDCOR or COG or conversations with other jurisdictions, that might inform us so that we could either make a recommendation or not. I'm just throwing that out.
And I would just put out there that we would do our best, if there's consensus that there's interest in this program, I would figure out the next steps, and that's working with SEDCOR, working with COG, working with county. We would figure out how we're going to accomplish it. And I think the basic thing, if there is an interest in this program, I'm just looking for the green light, and I'll figure it out from there. And because I don't want to say that this isn't something that we can't take on. I believe we do have the resources and we could pull this information. I just wanted to make sure that at least there was consensus that there's interest or support in doing this. I didn't want to get too far into it or too far down the road, and it's not something that the board was even interested in the first place. So
Sure.
realizing that, that it's going to require board action later if this takes the form of an ordinance and everything else. So we'll be able to maybe answer a lot more of the questions that the board has about the risk exposure, how this program works, what it would look like, staff commitment, all of that, if any, in administering a program like this. And again, I believe we do have the resources. I just want to make sure that we're not setting off on a path, and this isn't necessarily an idea that's supported by a majority of the board.
Sure. Well, I don't have a sense of urgency around this. Maybe I'm misreading the other side of the coin. Is there a sense of urgency around this particular program?
We do have a couple of project partners, one of which is a $53 million investment here in McMinnville that is hopeful to utilize this program, and their timeline for desiring access to the program is December. So in terms of urgency from partners that are looking to invest and looking to utilize this program, there is some some timing urgency there. In terms of kind of how SEDCOR views this program, there is an ongoing opportunity for projects within our county. And so there's always kind of the sooner the better, but just moving forward and getting something implemented is a win for us. And as I suggested, and as Ken mentioned, SEDCOR is happy to support whatever way to support staff and getting information and identifying next steps on this program.
Well, I would have interest in directing staff, recognizing that, as you noted, that it needs to fit in to the other work that we direct staff to do. And I know that Ken's really good at that. I've seen him.
And then also making sure that SEDCOR and COG can
Mm-hmm.
do a lot of that
Yeah,
heavy lifting.
yeah, exactly. That
At
it's
this
a
point,
come to Ken and Christian with the legal questions, and here's a draft ordinance. Is this,
right.
does this
Absolutely.
make sense? That kind of work.
Well, I feel like I still have a lot of questions, so I feel like I'm sort of in a hard spot
Mhm.
because I don't want to just say, hey, let's go do a deep dive, answer these questions, but I may not vote for it in the end. I mean, it's a hard question to answer.
I feel like it's like urban renewal where, it sounds good. And then you look further into it and there are some questions that you have that you don't know about just reading the pros. So I want to see what the cons are, and I haven't been able to find any, but I don't think we have enough information. But that's where I'm like,
Commissioner Starrett, I heard PROSE, and I was like, well, maybe we should write it in verse form, and that would help. But I understand what
Pros,
you mean.
cons.
That like we need to hear the some of the like what were the failures, and how are jurisdictions dealing with that
right.
as well.
Well, and
So
I think-
hopefully that's a direction to staff too, right?
My concern is that I'm not sure this is the role of county government. We have a lot of things that we do that are more critical in terms of our services to the public. And yet we want to try and do these things. We want to try and accommodate this and accommodate economic activity. But we also have to look at, some of these programs and stacking these programs. Like next week, we're going to talk about the rural industrial incentive tax program. This is a long-term commitment. This is what, 30 years or so? But once you're in it,
Sure.
you're in it. I mean,
Mhm.
this is, and I don't know what happens if down the road of the Board of Commissioners says, you know what, we're out, we don't want to do this anymore. I don't know what that means for the lenders or for the folks who are involved. So I just worry that this is a huge permanent kind of commitment and program that we're signing up for versus something that, and I have the same problem with urban renewal, frankly, but the rural tax incentive program, that's 3 years, right? It's sort of an easy, more manageable thing that we can get involved in. But my overarching concern is we're starting to stack all these programs, and I don't know that we have the staff to handle that. I just worry about that. So, and
Well, it
I
sounds
also
like it'd
kind
be
of
good to hear
question,
From the assessor as well. Sorry to interrupt you.
Mhm.
yeah,
sure.
well, we have a great
both of those.
assessor. So, I have full faith in his capabilities. I just, there's other components to this that require staff time. And I'm just, I don't know. I feel like I have a lot of unanswered questions still. So I hate
It
to
seems
say,
like perhaps, sorry.
well, I hate to say, go for it, but
Well, because one of the thoughts is as a recommendation for a next step, it could be because if there's interest in learning more about
Mhm.
this, but we could invest some time in and the next step could be scheduling a work session to a future date here, giving some time to able to
Yeah.
do some outreach and do some investigation and have maybe some more, because hearing all the questions that are being raised here, we'll have that as a base coat
Mhm.
to ensure that we have the right folks invited to that work session that may have answers to some of those questions. And then we actually have something more than the flyer
Yeah.
that kind of
Yeah.
provides the details of the program, that we have a few more elements to it that might help facilitate a discussion at a work session that then could drive the, ultimately making a decision on whether or not the county is going to adopt an ordinance and participate in this type of program.
Yeah, if I may, Chair. Thank you, Ken. I think that that's a great potential next step is
Mhm.
Patty from MEDP and I have contacted several folks throughout the state and other states who have been adopting and utilizing this program. And a couple of them have availed themselves to come before this board and have conversation, tell you about their program, what worked, what didn't work, maybe tweaks or adjustments they've made, the impact that it's had on staff or hasn't had on staff. And to answer some of those questions from a more technical application position, like they've actually done these things. So we would be happy if that is a desirable next step to bring forward some of these folks that have actually been running these programs.
Okay, so that sounds like a good resolution to that. Yeah, I think so. Any thoughts on when we might schedule the work session?
Well, we know we can't do it next
Next week.
Thursday, Commissioner Kula.
Yeah, we gotta duck out. And we've got the industrial.
And I would appreciate not doing it next Thursday, just to give time to.
But it sounds like it would be helpful to hear things like, what's the staff time per
Absolutely.
application, for example,
Absolutely.
or
And
ongoing as well. So
right.
hopefully you captured some of that too. I know they can have.
So maybe Ken should pick that.
Well, I'm just thinking in the interest of time, maybe it's something, I know this is our first meeting in September, that maybe we look at maybe the last meeting in September or possibly the first week of October, that may facilitate and, allow for enough time to ensure any other people that we'd like to attend the work session, it's on their calendar, and where you have sufficient time to do the research required, and reach out and compile materials.
Okay. And you said some of these folks might be from out of state.
There's potential. We have colleagues that we've been speaking to in Nevada and in Oregon and Washington.
Okay. So why don't we shoot for October 6th? That's the first meeting in October. Does that sound good? Gives almost a month in terms of trying to get them on the schedule.
Certainly, or
Okay.
I'm sure Zoom is probably still an option
Yeah.
if we have folks. Okay, perfect.
And they would be at the beginning of the meeting. So hopefully it'd be
Perfect.
pretty
Great.
quick at 10. So,
October 6th. Thank you.
Yeah,
okay.
thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank
I
you,
appreciate,
Abisha.
I
Mhm.
appreciate the
Thanks
chance
for
to
being
speak
here.
about it.
Thank you.
Okay, so we will add that to the October 6th formal session for a work session. Okay, and then do we have an add-on item?
Yes, Chair. So brought forward, I sent out a memorandum last night. My apologies for it arriving so late, but I had a meeting with the union in the afternoon. And so wanted to make sure that we were able to have that conversation with AFSCME, representatives from AFSCME. So in the packet, and we'll make sure that the memorandum is uploaded into the packet online as well immediately after this meeting. But based on the discussions we had, this is related to House Bill 4004. And again, it was after the discussions and the direction that we received during the executive session, and then what we presented to the union is a proposed plan on how we would apply the House Bill 4004 Workforce Stability Grant that HHS received for, again, for it's specific to behavioral health program elements. And so that memorandum is being presented for board consideration today. Happy to answer any questions.
So I noticed under number 1A, it says 9 months. I wasn't sure if that was supposed to be 6 months or 9 months. Are we keeping them pretty equal?
We kept it at 9 months.
Okay.
We figured that would still fall within the same fiscal year.
Okay,
I have a couple of questions, if I may, Chair.
sure. Go ahead.
But first of all, I want to thank you, Ken. I know that you had a meeting at 3, and it was, a lot of it was predicated on, this was predicated on that. And I know this has been a lot of work on behalf of County Council's office and staff. So thank you for that and getting it to us. And the other question I had was, we know that there was a timeline and some restrictions that the state had put on hiring bonuses. how will that impact what we're going to do? Will we be able to get this sign-on bonus in before that deadline?
We're going to continue to, we're still looking at the timeline requirements under the grant, but the recruitment and sign-on bonuses for those specific positions in behavioral health will continue as long as we have the funds available and as long as the timeline allows. This one is probably less critical. We're going to be rolling this out because, again, we want to fill vacant positions. So for that one, that's why it doesn't really have a definitive stop, because we're still trying to work through that. And it's really dependent on how successful we are in filling these positions. And then we'll be, applying those sign-on bonuses depending on successfully completing a recruitment process. So there's still some questions open around that. But our intent is we're really hoping that this will help as a driver and an incentive to help with our recruitment for, many of these really challenging, difficult to fill positions here, at least for the next 3 to 6 months, is what we're really hoping for. But again, it depends on the funding that we have available. And then we're also getting further clarification on the timelines associated with that as well.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, Chair, if I may, thank you for bringing this forward. I think that this looks good. I think that the timelines are it sounds like a little bit longer than we had talked. I think felt like we talked about at 6 months at some point. So I don't know. That may just be that there may be more than I don't understand about the 9 months versus 6 months. But you drafted this after meeting with AFSCME, correct? Or was this drafted? This is what
was
you presented to AFSCME.
This was put together based on the discussions that we had.
Yeah.
And then I put together a draft, and then I presented everything below the introductory statement. All those elements is what was presented to AFSCME yesterday.
Great.
And so the only change to this afterwards was put in a memorandum format to get it ready for the board.
Okay, great. Well, I'm glad to see this, and I'm glad to see that we're at this step. So that's my comments, besides maybe wanting to have a shorter time period between the two dispersals.
Well, I think that was a compromise between commissioners who were looking at a year and then ones that mentioned 6 months. So I think that's where that came from.
Okay.
And ideally, we're looking at having it occur, dispersing the funds within the same fiscal year.
Okay.
Yeah.
And I will say that, I had a friend say that they were really excited to apply for one of the positions that's open right now. So yay, they
Good.
did not know about any of this.
They just like Yamhill County.
Well, I told Ken in our meeting that they were coming from the position that they were in, the job description at least made them very excited.
Good.
So it's good to know that there are differences out there in the same work from different places. It was good feedback.
Thank you.
So this process has been interesting, lengthy and interesting. We have issues with workforce stability across every department in our county, as well as most industries are facing right now with the labor force, like anybody else. This grant came from the legislature and we applied for it. And this is focused on behavioral health employees specifically in our department and the services we do through that. We received a lot more money than I think that we thought we would receive. $3.5 million is a lot of money. And sort of in unfamiliar fashion, we received the money almost immediately before really being able to have a plan on how to spend it and digesting how we were going to actually manage this amount of money. So I appreciate the time that was put into this. I can tell you that I've talked to several commissioners who did receive these grant funds. They are still grappling with how to spend this responsibly. They have not sent checks out the door. We were concerned, and rightly so, about pay equity issues, and we had lengthy discussions about that. Certain counties sent the money back because the award was such that it would have caused more problems countywide in terms of their staffing issues than it would have helped. So counties have been sort of trying to grapple with how to best release these funds. The intention is good, but I think the way this rolled out was pretty frustrating. And I know that, anytime we get this amount of money, it's just not a good governance model to spin it around and send it out the door immediately. There was a lot of frustration about that. I don't really always understand the frustration because at the end of the day, this is our tax money that we're having to make decisions on, and we want to make responsible decisions. But I had a lot of frustrations. Now we can sort of speak freely about this. I had a lot of frustrations about this because I feel like as a board, we put the time in to research and debate and discuss and make sure we were doing this in a responsible way to make sure that we were focused on the right employees. This is meant for our behavioral health employees. We had I don't even know how many executive sessions we had, lengthy ones. The last one was an hour and a half long. I'm frustrated with comments that were made to the News Register about our process. I don't think it reflected what our intentions were. And ultimately, the staff and the public doesn't really see the sausage making per se. But I think that what came out of this current plan is it closely matches the intention of what the grant funds were meant for. So I think that it took a long time to get here, but ultimately we've made some pretty tough decisions that other commissioners are still grappling with. One in particular is having employees, sign a 2-year commitment, right? And if you leave before 2 years, we're going to claw the money back from you. That was something that was just it's not going to work. It's bad policy. So those kinds of things are serious considerations. And I feel like we spent a lot of time on this, and so did staff. I mean, this has been, something Christian and Ken have been working on for weeks. And so I just, a lot of frustrations with this policy. I don't know that I would accept a grant like this again. I feel like in the beginning, we felt like we were kind of backed into a corner on getting this money out the door, but the end results is something that I feel good about.
Chair, I wanted to add, again, appreciation for what I know our Health and Human Services Director has really been struggling with department heads and all kinds of shortfalls over there, not being able to deliver the services that we're tasked with. And so I feel that what happens is sort of this money was dangled in front of county employees. And there was, again, a lot of misinformation. And I will speak to the fact that I'm looking at story in the News Register. Yamhill County commissioners have for weeks failed to address a bill. That's not what happened. And then there's another comment here that the county website lists 27 jobs available in Health and Human Services compared to just 1 or 2 in other departments. And then I looked at Marion County's HHS vacancies, and there are 25. So it's comparable. And then I see some quotes, Commissioner Kula. I was very disappointed at the sort of creating strife where there was none. This board never had any intentions of not awarding this money. But it says here, unless the News Register is inaccurate, which is entirely possible because very rarely are they accurate. But I've contacted Nicole Montesano on a number of different and finally gave up because after a while, the agenda and the bias is just so pronounced. But on July 16th, Kula tweeted that a proposal for how to use the money had been pulled from the board's agenda. I'd never seen this on the agenda. It was never on the agenda. And then we're getting emails from employees saying, we were told that commissioners think that the employees in behavioral health already make too much. So all of this stuff creates divisiveness, creates a culture of dividing not only the board. We're trying to make sure that we were within the bounds of what this law provided for, what this bill provided for, and also that we didn't run afoul of any of the increasing restrictions that the states put on this. So I just feel like there was a lot of misinformation out there and it was unnecessary. And I'm happy to see that we finally have something, but due diligence had to be done.
Well,
Yeah.
I'm glad that we're here too. So it's great. Thank you.
Well, I think, as a side note, I think this underscores my previous comments and push to establish some type of communication policy, not just a policy, but a plan as to how the county, we as a board and our staff is going to relay information to the public to make sure it's factual and unbiased. And so we don't end up causing unnecessary strife and where our employees are upset and they have no idea what's going on. And we feel like we can't talk about it because we're having these discussions in executive session. So that's, a topic for another day, but.
And I think, Chair, to be fair, we don't have to have conversations in executive session too. Just that's a policy decision that we make on a regular basis too.
Yes. However, it's frustrating when the reporter at the News Register sits in an hour-and-a-half long executive session and listens to every word of it and knows exactly where we stand on this and then reports something totally opposite. It's not helpful. So we need to work on that going forward. That's a long-term project, but the communication policy, I think, needs to be, this just sort of underscores the need for something like that.
And the only part that I would clarify is the executive session that we had was specifically because we did receive a demand to bargain from AFSCME over this specific issue because it involved employees, the members of the union. And so the intent of the executive session was to get some direction to then comply with the demand to bargain and meet with the union and discuss, what was being proposed. And I think one of the challenges, because again, the instructions to the media that attends those executive sessions is they're not allowed to report on those discussions because again, we talked about a lot of options during that session beyond just this final plan. This was the outcome of those discussions. So there are some challenges in navigating both the rules around PECBA and contract negotiations and talking about the plans and all the various options that we did talk about and how we came up with this plan that does present some challenges on, and it, in fact, it even limits on what we can even communicate out to employees on the membership, because again, there's specific rules around that when we have a demand to bargain about what communications and information to avoid any potential direct bargaining or an attempt to, undermine the union or PECBA. So a lot of the things that we do have in play and the processes that we had to follow. And I understand it's frustrating when it comes to the communications because we want to be able to share everything that we're considering that we're going through this, but it does get further complicated. And we have this for every contract with the 5 contracts that we have, we go through this each time we're in negotiations. There's a lot of options and a lot of considerations that go into that are discussed in the executive session. And it is challenging on how to communicate all the various options that we did look at and all the work that went into this. And a lot of time that does get overlooked. And again, I also want to just highlight, I know Lindsay's not here, but Director Manfred and I, we've been spending months in multiple meetings and discussions and vetting and to even prepare the various options for the board to consider to present. And so this was a heavy lift to get us to this point. And I will say in recognition, it was a very positive meeting and I thought it went really well with the union yesterday and they were receptive to the plan. And so I will say, kudos to the representatives. They asked a lot of good questions yesterday, and but again, it went well.
Good.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, commissioners, I will move approval of the plan, I guess.
That's what I was gonna say.
For House Bill 4004, workforce stability grant funds. You need anything else? Is that good? In the amount of 3 million. Okay, yep, in the amount of $3,530,911.08. Any further discussion?
No, Chair, but thank you again, as staff. Tremendous
Thank you.
work.
Okay, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed, same sign. Thank you. Motion passes.
I like the thank you at the end. I was ready for motion passes.
Lots of thank yous.
Thank you, thank you.
Okay, any other additional items to add on? No?
No,
Okay.
Chair.
Item J is public hearings. We have no public hearings today. And that brings us to announcements. So I mentioned briefly the Rural Industrial Tax Credit Program. I'm going to be bringing that forward next Thursday, at least an intro
Great.
draft for that, what that
Okay,
could look
great.
like. And then, so we have an issue with PGE. You
Mhm.
have all seen the warning about shutting power down for, I would say, a sizable number of our residents in Yamhill County this weekend. I believe starting tomorrow morning through Sunday, sometime Sunday. So
Is when it might.
when it might be impacted.
Mhm.
The storm is supposed to come tomorrow.
Yeah.
Our emergency manager is on the PGE call right now, so he will be providing us more details in terms of their decision. But I just want to make sure that we are prepared to disseminate information about potentially a mobile crisis unit that PGE would send out to the Sheridan area. And then maybe coordinate with fire districts as well to make sure everybody's covered. I am
Medical.
not aware of capabilities that we have for battery backups or anything like that in terms of medical equipment needs or medical devices that need electricity, but we will be asking those questions this afternoon. So
And there's
Um,
some, and we will hear this from PGE, but there was some mention of like centers where people can go who need power. And I think we'll probably hear more from Emergency Manager Young about the details of that.
Right. Right.
okay,
And then in speaking of the communications, I just want to give an update because I know Brian sent me an email and put out a messaging
Okay.
while we were in session.
Oh, okay.
So Brian sent out, looks like pushed out via Everbridge, the notification, the information about the information from PGE.
Okay.
So it's a quick write-up and then an access to that. So as part of that communication.
okay.
Great. And it's a good time, Chair, to plug signing up for the
Yeah.
county's emergency alerts. Because when I first joined the board, Commissioner Starrett several times mentioned reminders to us. And it's been very helpful. At first, I had no idea what you were talking about, confession. And now we get surges of signups and they happen around emergencies. So let's do it for emergencies.
Right. And it's easy. Just go to the
Yeah.
website and it says Yamhill County Alerts.
Lots of options for how much you want to get, how much information and
Right.
how much you want to give them.
And it comes in really handy, especially when you have incidents that occur in your
Yes,
neighborhood.
it
Yeah.
does. It does come in really handy.
Urgency of-
Yeah, and I know, I
knows
will say
that.
that I was communicating with somebody who thought that it was a reverse 911. And my understanding at least is that Everbridge and the emergency alerts are a separate system, is that these are things you have to opt into, whereas some of the things that maybe you received were actually just pushed out to everybody.
Yeah. You don't have
Yeah,
a
through your
choice.
providers.
It's like.
Oh, yeah,
duck,
you got both. That's
Yeah.
right.
Duck,
Yeah, you were special in that way.
Duck and cover.
duck and cover.
Okay,
And
Any
carry water
additional-
with you if you're going out and about. I'll say that.
Yeah.
I know that that's
Yeah.
our chief
Um,
isn't here, but whatever, he'd be saying the same thing.
have those candles ready.
Yep.
Any further announcements, commissioners?
Just one update, Board of Health meeting meets every several months. And as liaison, I'd like to bring up things that the Board of Health can be looking at. And one of the things that I asked them to do is to take a look at the August 11th, the CDC reversed their COVID guidelines. And we know that a lot of people pretty much were defamed for even saying some of the things the CDC is now saying. The other thing is there are now 3,600 pages that have come out on the Pfizer trial data. And that's something the FDA tried to keep secret for 75 years, but now it's coming out. We're starting to see more traction on what these adverse events are. We know that there are 44% of the women in the trials who were pregnant lost their babies, and then myocarditis in young boys is an issue. Those are getting more traction. So I asked the Board of Health to pretty much look at these and how much of this we would like to acknowledge and share with people instead of giving them the old narrative, which was it's safe and effective for everybody, because now the information is coming out. So they said they were open to getting more of this data, which is kind of hard to find, and I'm happy to share that with them. So that's just the update.
Thank
And
you.
then I realized that I was trying to keep you updated on the large poultry CAFO work group.
Oh, right.
And we've had 2 meetings since the last update, but really it's been it's been information gathering. Is what's the regulatory environment for water for these poultry operations? What's the land use component? What's the Oregon Department of Agriculture's CAFO permit process? From what I hear and what we heard in testimony, at least, there's really it's important for folks who are concerned about the process to pay attention to the permitting, right? So if a neighbor is worried about a manure lagoon, that they need to be really on top of that, pointing out deficiencies if there are deficiencies. But the one area that I remain concerned about as a member of the work group is just that historically livestock watering is exempt from water rights. So it's, you have a domestic well and you can water as many chickens as you want without a water right. Because of how many other things require a water right, it does seem fair to at least consider requiring a water right for those unlimited uses of poultry water. So that's an area at least that I see where it reduces the potential impacts to just neighbors who have a well that they're drinking water out of.
So is that something how does the public get information on these updates and things they should be looking at?
Yeah. So if you search large poultry CAFO work group.
Okay, so how many people would be searching large poultry other than Kit, who used to be in the business?
Who are either operating them or who are nearby them will be.
What
for
is it
sure.
again?
It's large poultry CAFO, CAFO work group. And there's one more. The last one was just public comment, and I think we heard from 75 folks. And then the next one will be just a wrap up of every member of the work group, from the Northwest Chicken Council, which you were surprised that existed.
Chicken Council.
This was precipitated by one particular farmer who was applying for multiple very large operations, and he's on the work group as well. And he's provided his voice kind of all along, so he'll have his closing remarks as well. And for me, we know that wineries, for example, don't need to have water rights permits in order to use that up to 15,000 gallons a day, but very large outfits get to use as much as their wells are capable of. And it feels like bringing us into maybe a more modern area where we actually have to go through a public process in order for them to get their water allowed use. And that's really what water rights permit is. If there's enough water, there's just a process for it.
Is OWRD involved?
They are, yeah. And there was one whole work session just on from OWRD.
Okay.
And they did a phenomenal job of kind of laying out where their jurisdiction lies and where it doesn't lie.
Good to know. Thank
Yeah.
you.
Manure lagoon. So
Sorry, I was like, this is prompt a warning. But that's it for me. I just wanted to make sure you were up to date on my.
I think I'll use that term.
first
again.
time I've heard that in a public meeting.
We heard it a lot. So
Ken, did you have? You look like you were.
Oh, no, I was just trying to figure out what the noise was.
Yeah, it was weird.
No, I think the only thing that I had is just to clear up, because I know originally it was on the agenda for this week, but Ken Friday asked to hold off on the Newburgh area.
Urban
growth.
Area Management Commission.
yes, that's right. It was on the agenda. Yeah.
It was on the agenda, but we, per Ken's request, and he's also going to be out of the office. So that was rescheduled to occur, I believe, on the 28th. So
Okay.
it's the end of this month to have that discussion. And then the other thing I'll be putting in the packet, but received a request from ODOT on an agreement that
yeah.
has to do with the bypass.
Mhm.
So I'm still getting information, but it'll be in the packet for your consideration for next week. It's an IGA, and I can share more information from you. I'm still
Yeah.
reviewing what
Mhm.
ODOT. I wasn't involved with these meetings, and then I got this request, and I'm like, I don't even know anything about this. So
Apparently they're moving Witoski, excuse me. Sorry if you're watching. It's Winooski. They're moving Winooski. And since it's a county road, we need to be involved in accepting, that we are maintaining this new road. It's aligns it with Wilsonville Road.
Right.
Okay.
Which I know you know more about than me. but-
That's a dangerous intersection.
Yeah, right.
Very
So I
dangerous.
believe that will be a signalized intersection right there.
On Wilsonville.
Wilsonville, Winooski,
Okay.
219.
Did we
But
ever
we,
get the questions answered around
I was just gonna say
the
that.
land use questions?
Wasn't the
or
planning
zoning.
commission supposed to
Zoning.
look at that again?
We're all looking at Christian.
They looked at you, so I'm starting to look at you. Can
He's
you
done more
remind
research on
me
this
of
than I
the,
have.
what
We'll
was
look at
the
the
land use
agreement.
question
It,
around?
because the
I'm
county.
sorry,
it
I was
was-
distracted by noises again. So
He's hearing the noises.
squirrel.
Yes, squirrel.
There was a component that was within the county, and then there was that the county should designate it. What was it? Designated, it went before the planning commissioner.
So-
I remember
Sounds
it
like that
as-
we will get more information though.
No,
Yeah.
but I'm sorry because I was distracted again. So what was the original? question.
It's
Part
have
of-
we made the land use decisions?
Do
on
you,
this?
do you remember then that was a point of contention as to whether or not if the county went ahead and said, yeah, okay, it's going to be zoned, whatever the zoning change would be, that it would then be able to be used for a park. And then there was the concern about if this could be used for a park, does that also mean a trail? And then they were going to send it to the planning commission. And I believe they did, and then it went into the ether.
Yeah,
Don't
it hasn't come before us.
remember that.
And
but
then it
we
was
should
supposed to
find out
come
that
back.
information if we can.
Yeah, and I think that's not this Ken, but
Right, I
Ken
was gonna
Friday
say,
is
that's-
probably a better
yeah.
question.
Yeah.
Friday's
And
probably
we
the
can get an
answer,
update.
Okay, that would be great.
Yeah, because the interchange
It
comes
did.
into several different zones that don't allow a bypass. Right.
Do you remember? You don't remember that?
No, I don't. No, but this is Winooski being redirected to the
Right.
Yes.
the intersection with Wilsonville Road.
But the county
So
had,
it's not a bypass. I'm just saying that it's not part of a regional bypass overlay.
no, this would
Mhm.
still, the county was going to have to make some provision. Do you remember?
Yeah, but it wasn't super specific to the bypass, but it had to do with the zonings with some of the properties that were bordering or in the bypass.
Yeah.
Right.
Areas, but it was a blanket amendment to all the zones to allow bike or trails and whatever, a certain zone, and the blankets for all the zones.
Okay.
It might be good
Maybe I
to get this
misunderstood.
information from Director Friday. as
And then
part
it
of
went
that.
away.
We sent recommendations, so it's back to you guys.
Right.
eventually.
Yeah, it was my understanding that ODOT made the request though, because they weren't, otherwise they wouldn't be able to connect there.
Right.
So I guess we just need some, we need some.
It's a good question, and I'll connect with Ken Friday and get an update.
Sounds good. Thank you.
Okay.
That was more than you expected.
A couple quick, just I suppose, ending announcements. I had the honor of meeting Coach Kennedy last night. I don't know if you're familiar with Coach Kennedy, but he was the high school football coach in Bremerton, Washington, who was fired for praying individually on the football field. And
It was like
Christian.
Kennedy v. Bremerton School District.
Mhm.
Yeah,
something that- right?
Christian's probably familiar with this case, but essentially he went through 7 years of litigation ended up suing the school district and went back and forth up and down the chains and ultimately to the Supreme Court this past June. And they decided in his favor. So kind of a fascinating story. He's just a regular guy. He's just a football coach.
Ex-Marine. Oh, well,
Ex-Marine.
there's no such thing as an ex-Marine. He's
Yeah.
a retired Marine.
Yeah.
Thank you for
Uh,
clarifying.
He didn't have to then.
Yeah. Just a very down-to-earth, loving individual. It was really cool to hear his story because he was there with his legal team. So they described the entire process. So it's kind of neat to hear that. But obviously precedent-setting case. And it reminded me of some of the struggles that we've been through over the past, well, for you guys, it's been 3 years. For me, it's been 2, but with COVID and some of the restrictions on religious and medical liberties and the fights that we've had, it was very similar to what he was describing as his effort. So just wanted to say that because that was what I walked away with was, wow, these fights have been happening really across the entire country, even in little Yamhill County, but it's the same push for upholding medical and religious freedom. And then I just want to mention it's back to school week. Kids are back in school, which is awesome. It's a great time of year. I get very excited about it. My son could care less, but so we want to wish the kiddos happy back to school and praying that they have a great year, successful year. And other than that, I think we are wrapped. Anything further?
No chair.
No soccer updates, football?
Oh,
Colton's not here.
oh,
So
he's getting the look.
Since you asked, how much time do you want to spend? There's so much going on. I'm not quite sure where to begin.
we have a meeting, so we'll catch up.
We do have a meeting. That's right. We're late for that, but yeah, lots of Champions League activity and a full slate of games set for the weekend. And the World Cup's coming, so don't forget November.
World Cup.
Yeah.
I caught the Ducks game. It was kind of not pretty last week.
I'm going to stay away from that.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, well, if there's nothing further for the good of the order, I will adjourn the Yamhill County Board of Commissioners formal informal session for September 8th, 2022